Hi, everybody. I'm Max Gaines. I'm from Santa Barbara, California. Um, I just finished college, this past spring, or actually this past summer at George Washington University, in Washington, D.C., where I studied marketing, but also I started making ceramics and pottery while I was at school. And ultimately, that led me to apply to the residency. I knew about the residency because I had met Luann last summer and was familiar and knew Connor, one of the residents last summer. And so I was kind of thinking about applying to this for the past year, and I'm glad that I did. So, um, a little bit of what I made over the summer. Um, I really wanted to continue working on some forms and concepts that I had been playing around with a bit at school. So that really was like incorporating gestural elements and movement into my pots and sort of um, moving away from strict rules for myself, like um, kind of not trying to have everything be so perfect. I felt like I got to a place with my technical skill that I could sort of let go of um, some more, I guess, traditional guidelines that I set for myself. So here's a couple of the first pots that I made um, on my first day at the residency this summer. Um, I made a lot of pots. Um, so these pots just kind of incorporate some of those elements that I like exploring. So like sort of uh, loose lines. I'll often like pull up the walls of a pot pretty thin, such that like it wants to collapse, and I sort of try to guide it into collapsing in different ways that I think sort of accentuate lines in a nice way and make the pot sort of dance and can encourage glazes to pool and shift in different ways. Um, Here's a couple of other pots with that example. I definitely have been drawn repeatedly back to some sort of like round bulbous jar shape with a prominent rim. I think those, for whatever reason, I think maybe that pot, that sort of form has a lot of shapes and elements that I like. Maybe it just is somewhat symmetrical and simple, and that's what attracts me. I'm not entirely sure, but I find myself continuing to go back to it. But with these pots, I think it's pretty apparent that I started to mess around with some mark making that I ultimately decided to stick with for most of the summer and really explore how I could utilize it on different surfaces and shapes. And so I basically all of the markings that are here with like my standard tools. So I think like either a needle or the wooden knife or just my fingers. Um, yeah, here, so just a tall bottle shape, kind of bringing in the sides rather than um, a bulbous shape. Just trying to basically give myself another surface to put these marks on and refine some of the details like the rims. I started to play around with the idea of folding over the lip of the pot onto itself to sort of create a stacked rim effect. And I came to really like how that looked, the one rim sitting on another, especially when I sort of altered one of the components of it and left the other more clean. Um, these are a couple of sectional pots that I made more early on in the summer. Um, I've always been fascinated by large scale wheel thrown work and like other large scale forms of ceramic arts, but specifically on the wheel. Um, I think something about how the wheel demands so much of your attention that with any project when you're sitting down on it. I think like as you scale up, that sort of gets more intensified, and the importance to really pay attention gets a lot higher. And I also kind of like the idea of like having to step away from the wheel and stand back really to even get a grasp of what your pot actually looks like. There's something pretty exciting about the process of making work like that that just um, keeps me making large work. So these pieces in specific were, um, you know, exercising some work with sectional pieces, but also trying to play a little bit more conceptually with design. And so I thought it would be fun to make some pieces that were a little confusing to the onlooker. And so I tried to make these bottles look like they were maybe upside down. And as I was making them, I got lots of comments or questions like asking if they were upside down or if they were meant to be some other orientation. Um, and that definitely pleased me because that's what I was going for. Um, Here's another sectional pot. On the left's a video that I think Luann took this of me. Just I look like I am compressing maybe this sort of tricky, physically tricky spot on this sectional piece. It's a lot of weight that gets put on that really narrow base when you're working on the very top section of the sectional. Um, the way that I've come to like to work with large sectional pots is I like to keep everything very wet because I want to be able to manipulate it sort of through to the end of the process as much as I can. And if I want to be able to impart the marks that I want to make and some of the alterations, the clay kind of needs to be wet enough to work with through to the end. So kind of making some subtle but important movements down there. So here's a few more pieces that I think just nicely demonstrate some of the elements that I've been keeping up with throughout the summer and definitely feel happy that I explored them well. So on the left is a platter. I guess I sort of took more of an artsy shot of this and not an informational one, but there's a big split rim that goes around this platter. And I imparted that before squeezing out different sections with my fingers. And I think that's an interesting design. This cup in the middle is sort of resembles a lot of cups that I've been making recently, where I tried to section the clay into sort of two different spaces and make it look like it's a multiple part piece when it's really not. It's just maneuvering the rib in a way that sort of makes the clay stack over itself, and also altering it into a more triangular shape is something that I've been really fond of doing recently. And on the right sort of demonstrates like a pretty strong juxtaposition and angles that I like to use. I mean, it's resembled in the cup in the middle as well, but a very sharp diagonal angle at the bottom of a pot really looks nice to me. And I think gives a lot of tension to the piece. So I sort of went even further with that concept of a tight angle at the bottom with this pot here and like a really kind of aggressive change of shape back into like this really small bottle neck. I really wanted to pay attention to the details of the rim on this, and my mark making started to get quite refined at this point in the summer. I felt like my throwing was really on point from lots of hours of practice, and so I'm happy with how this form came out, and it really like sent me into a new direction of pieces. So this is another piece that sort of followed that one, where I really ran away with the form and thought sort of the form spoke enough of itself that it didn't really need the mark making or the rim that I had been adding to pieces before. And I ended up really liking how this piece looked on its own. This was another pretty logistically difficult piece to make. It's made in sections, and with that huge sort of angle at the bottom, distributing weight with a sort of wet piece of clay gets a little tricky. So I had to use some different elements of heat and whatnot to keep everything working. Here's a couple other iterations of this sort of shape. I like to think of them as some sort of bell on the left, I added a couple of attachments that I've used in some other pieces. On the right, I try to just keep it simple and play with some proportions. These pieces are really fun to make. Um, so with this piece, I sort of got bored with the mark making that I was doing before, and then got bored with just the clean lines on those forms that I was exploring, and thought it was time to reintroduce some texture and mark making, but in a bit more of a rustic way this time, and a bit more aggressive. So I got a bunch of slabs of clay and just started to make marks into them to figure out like what I thought I liked, and then sort of went away with uh, this pot and wanted to make it look not only like capture the textures that I created on that slab before, but also I wanted it to look like there was a slab on the pot itself. Um, I looked into some videos of hat makers, and I don't know if anybody's ever seen a hat maker make a hat like a cowboy hat maker. They stretch the leather or the suede over this big kind of head shape, and when they stretch it down, I think it has such an interesting look. And so I kind of tried to mimic this with stretching a slab over the top of the pot. And I continued to play with this a bit more with other shapes as well. This one, a bit of a more tall and narrow shape, but similar idea of like that kind of stretched slab on the top. But this one I kind of wanted to give more of an ode to clothing, and I think this one kind of gives more of a dress look to it. This is sort of a different approach that I took to that slab over the pot effect, rather than sort of stretching the pot or stretching the slab over the pot to conceal it. I play with the idea of maybe like cloaking the pot with a wrap or some kind of cloak. So I did that with this pot as well. Then another version, sort of refining the idea after figuring out some logistic hiccups with the last one. Just this is another piece where I tried to mimic this slab over pot look, but I started to play with poking holes all the way through the pot on this. I was using a lot of dots or impressions before with the back of a needle tool at the beginning of the summer, and that was a bit too clean of a mark to make on this style of a pot, and so I needed to figure out something that was a bit more rough. And I think that this really hit it for me. This is another similar pot. I felt like this kind of showcases a lot of the mark making and texturizing that I was able to come to over the summer. And I'm pretty happy with how this piece turned out. Here's a few just final examples of just some random pots that I took videos of. There are probably 100 other pots that I made over the summer that I didn't capture anything of, but it all sort of looks somewhat like these. Got a big charger plate on the left, and this middle, like sort of birdhouse looking pot. Was interested in maybe mimicking some architectural elements in my pottery. And on the right is sort of, this was just an interesting afternoon platter. So just want to show some images of the work that you just saw finished. Glazing and firing was a pretty eye-opening component of the summer for me, which I really felt like solidified some preferences for myself with my work, but also like inspired me on some new paths of exploration with materials and types of firing. So these are some pieces that I glazed with an ash glaze, plus some other glazes in combination, but I came to really love the look of ash glazes, really because I was inspired by wood firing, but wood firing is a tough thing to access in Southern California, or at least in my position. And so I try my best to find things that could mimic that, or that could give me similar elements to how wood-fired surfaces tend to look. And so ash glazes were a good place to start, I think. I also learned how to spray my own glazes this summer, which I think really helps to capture some of the elements of a wood fire or an atmospheric firing. These two pieces are also some combination of an ash glaze with another glaze, and experimenting with spraying and layering in different thicknesses, and firing and heavy reduction firing. These pots are sort of, I guess, like mark the start of some experimentation with Shino glazes. Similar to the ash glazes, the Shino glazes to me very much resemble a lot of wood fired and atmospheric surfaces like soda firing. And I was really blown away with the variation of surface that you could get from one single glaze recipe on one type of clay. So all the clay or all the pots that you see that look like a Shino in my presentation are glazed with the same Shino glaze and the same studio recycled clay that I got entitled to over the summer. And I just really love how different the final surface product can be with this one glaze. So the pot on the left was a pot that we saw, I guess both these pots we saw earlier, but this is both with the same Shino glaze. I started to try to experiment with different ways of applying the glaze and letting it dry in different conditions. I also was really lucky to have the opportunity to learn how to fire a gas kiln this summer from James Haggerty. And so we got to fire a couple of different times over the summer where I got to really influence the type of firing, the amount of reduction, the time we held for temperature, and what temperature we ultimately got to, the stack of the kiln. And that was really nice to be able to have a lot of control in how things were fired in my end result. And I think my pieces show for it. These are, yeah, just some more pieces that we saw earlier, but again, apply with the Shino. I really tried to focus on spraying specific parts of the pot and hoping to encourage some like coagulation of soda ash, which can create these crystals in the carbon trapping with these like dark spots on the pot to sort of mimic the wood fire look. These pieces both have like a bit of a different alteration to them. The pot on the left actually was fired once with Shino. I wasn't so happy with how it looked, so I glazed it again, and I actually left the pot while it was glazed raw in the rain, and allowed like a lot of the glaze to wash off and also collect a lot of the minerals from the rainwater. And so that's like a lot of the rivulet sort of effect that you see on the left. And it also picked up a sort of an incredible luster where the gold parts are very reflective. The piece on the right, I sprayed with the Shino glaze, but also with a layer of soda ash. That's what really created this sort of celadon-like surface that really surprised me over the Shino. These are just some sort of smaller pots that I made that implement some elements that I used a lot of this summer, sort of just as experiments, but I ended up really liking them. These two pots were also glazed and left in the rain. So a lot of the glaze washed off the top and was allowed to run down. And then I sprayed the top of them with some natural ash just to kind of give them a sheen. Just some more pots also with the same Shino. The pot on the right, I really went heavy with some ash that Luann gave me. And I just applied the Shino, and while it was a wet, threw kind of some handfuls of ash, and I really like how it turned out. So that's my work from the summer. I guess I just want to thank the Ventura County Potters Guild for giving me the opportunity to apply to the residency and also to award me the membership at Clay Studio. I really feel like I got a lot out of this summer. It was a very valuable experience for me. And I hope that the Guild continues to offer this to students in the future, because I think it's a great resource. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Thanks, Max. That was great.